Okay, today I'm going to make a video showing how I install a solid wood band around the perimeter of a piece of plywood. This is a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood that's going to be part of a piece of furniture I'm building. It's a coffee table. This is one of the legs right here. The leg is made of mahogany, and then there's a stainless steel knurled knob on the top that's adjustable. I ran a 1/2 inch stainless rod through there, and then I drilled and tapped it. And that's where the glass sits on the top. And the legs will sit at a 45-degree angle when all four of them are together. And on the inside I have this piece of stainless that's going to be screwed to the inside of the leg. I ran the stainless through a roller and then put it in a press to bend this, and then polished it. So there's 4 setups like this, and to hold all 4 legs together I'm going to use this wood panel. And it's going to sit something like that. That's going to hold all the legs together, and then I'm going to put a set of piece of glass on the top. But in order to use this plywood, I have to band the edges to conceal the end grain of the plywood. Now, when I first started thinking about the design of this table, I just figured I'd use solid wood and glue it up. I didn't really have anything at the time, so I thought a good piece of plywood would work, and then I would just band it with solid wood. And I didn't have any mahogany plywood either, so I asked my buddy, and he had some doors from an old Chris Craft that he salvaged. So I cut that piece out of this. This is a cabin door, and this is off of a 1965 Chris Craft Constellation. And they use 3/4 inch plywood, and they just put a rabbet joint on it. And here's the marks from the hinges. But what I'm real happy about is the quality of this wood. You really can't find any mahogany plywood like this anymore. If you could see this, all the plies in there, it's 7 ply. And the outer plies, they're mahogany, and actually all the inner plies look to be the same species, all mahogany, which is rare. But the outer plies, they're like a 1/16 of an inch thick. So they're actually sandable. And you just can't find plywood like this anymore. So I cut that out, and there's only a thin finish on it. It's been stained, and there's probably 1, maybe 2 coats of satin varnish on it. So that's not going to be a problem to take that off. And the grain is going to look really nice. You can see kind of how the straight grain. It's not necessarily ribbon grain, but it's straight, and I'm just real lucky to get this this piece of plywood. So and also a plywood panel connecting those 4 legs, it's going to be more stable than if I glued up some 3/4 inch mahogany. Which might want to bow or twist over time. This piece is going to be a lot more stable. So, but in order to use it, I need to band it with solid wood. So that's what this video is going to be about. I've done this a lot in the past on different pieces that I've used or incorporated with furniture or shelving or different projects for boats. And it's not hard to do. That's the thing. Even with these curves, I'm going to show you how to do that. How to go all the way around there with solid wood, glue it on, and then I'm going to sand all this finish off. I'm going to leave the finish on it while I glue these, and then I'll probably scrape the finish off with a heat gun and a scraper, and then run this through my sander. You could hand sand it, and that would be just as good if you don't have like a thickness sander. So the first thing you have to do is cut your panel to the right size and shape. So it's 12 inches wide, and the very ends, you see how that has an arc to it? It just looks better, I think. So I put that arc on it on both ends, and then I radius the corners. So the general shape is there, and now you have to figure out what width band you're going to use. And I was going to use a 1/2 inch, but I decided to go with 5/8. So the banding on this piece of wood, it's going to be made up of 8 pieces. These are the 2 straight pieces. and then there's going to be 4 corner pieces and then 2 end pieces, so that's 8 total. So the first thing I did was cut and sand this, so all this is real smooth. You want your transitions from the flat side into this radius. You want all that really smooth because it's going to make it a lot easier to fit the pieces. And then the next thing I did was I just picked out a piece of mahogany and I planed it down. Now this plywood, it's actually just a touch over 3/4 inch thick. It's about a 1/64 over. But whatever your plywood is, if you're doing this with 1/2 inch or 5/8 or 3/4, whatever you make the molding or the edge pieces, I always make it a little bit thicker, about a 32nd thicker. So when I glue this up, this is going to be a little bit proud, and then I'll just work this down to this surface. Now, one thing, talking with that, going back to this, the thickness of the plies, what makes this so nice using this old wood is that there's plenty of room here for sanding a little bit, even though I'm not going to sand that much. But that top ply is a 1/16 of an inch thick. Once I get all these edges glued on and I go to sand this, I'm not going to have to worry about going through this ply. If you look at plywood nowadays, like teak plywood or mahogany plywood, when you go to look at it, if you have a piece of 3/4 inch stuff that they produce now, it looks like 7 plies, and that the outer ply actually looks just like it does here. It looks like it's a 1/16 of an inch thick, but it's deceiving because there's actually one more ply on the very top that is so thin you have to really get up on it and look at it, and it's, in most cases, it's about as thin as a piece of loose leaf paper. It's so thin that the trouble is when you go to band it like this, you have to be really careful not to sand down through that ply because you'll sand right through it. So that's why it's really nice using this this older mahogany plywood, because the plies are so thick and it's really good looking grain in the wood. So back to the banding pieces, there's going to be 8 of them. I planed them down just about a 32nd thick. So what I'll do is, let me slide this down. When I go to glue these on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue them and brad them. And I just kind of center this on here so it's a little proud on the top and the bottom. And what I do is the next thing I do is I figure out my corners. I think this piece is upside down right now. Yeah. So what you do is you figure out where you want your corners to stop. Now, I have one of the corners done here. I have to turn this around. I have one corner fit already. And I'm going to show you how to fit all this stuff. But you see my tick marks right here and here. That's where it starts and stops. And those tick marks are the same on each corner. So you have to lay those out, because when I'm fitting this corner piece, I fit it and it's a little bit long, and then at the very end I cut it. And I'll show you all that too. So what I do is I won't glue this one until I get this end one fit. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to stop the camera. This one's fit, and I'll show you how to fit this next corner over here. But I'm going to stop the camera, and then I'm going to fit this piece, and then I'm going to glue this one on. And then before I glue this one on, I'm going to fit this piece, and then I'll glue this one on. So I always have 2 pieces ahead. And that'll become clear why I do that when I get going here. And I'm going to end up using Gorilla Glue. I usually use West System epoxy, but I'm going to go ahead and use Gorilla Glue and then some stainless steel brads. Since everything else on this table is stainless steel, I figured I have some, so I'm going to use them on here. So I'll stop the camera. I'll get set up. I'll fit this one here, and then I'll start the camera back up when I cut this one to length. Okay? Okay, well, I'm ready to lay out and start cutting this end piece here along this arc. But before I do that, I wanted to mention 2 things on the corners. And the first thing being that I always label everything. So each one of these corners has either an A, B, C, or D labeled on it. And as I'm fitting the pieces, I'll label the pieces also. So this is corner C, and this piece here has a C on it, so I don't get confused. So I always label everything. And the other thing is that I always extend these corners out farther than the point of curve, which is, if I have a straight edge here, you can see where that curve starts right here. I have kind of a tick mark right there. Instead of cutting this corner piece right there, I always include a flat section. It just makes it easier. That way, if I start sanding away a little bit too much, I don't want to come into that curve. So that's just arbitrary. I could have went, you know, a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. It looks like about 1 inch here. That's long. And I guess another reason for that is this side piece was starting to get. I had just enough. So instead of cutting that short, I just extended this out a little bit. So I always extend it out a little bit further past that point of curve. So that was the other thing. So the process of laying this out is going to be the same for the end pieces as they are the corners. And what I do is, there's a tick mark here and a tick mark here, and I always go past there. I don't want to put the edge of that wood right on there. I always want these pieces to be long, and then I can cut them afterwards. So that's plenty right there. So it's just as easy as taking and marking this. And also what I do is, this is a center line mark right here. I always put a mark on here to know where to line it up, because from left to right, I should, what I'm going to do after I stop the camera is I'm going to take and extend this line down so I have a tick mark there so it's easier to see. But you always want to mark this piece and put a mark on the piece of wood there so you know where it goes from left to right. I'm going to look straight down on this, and that looks pretty good. So that's the mark. I'll take this over on the bandsaw, cut that. I'll cut that, and then I'll take it to my spindle sander, and I'll probably put the big 4-inch drum on there and sand that down. And then once I do that, I'll start the camera back up and show you what I do from there, okay? Okay, I took this piece over to the bandsaw, I cut it, and then I sanded it on the spindle sander. And as I put it up here, this side looks pretty good, but there's a gap over here, which is, it's a little bit proud here. So, but what I want to do now is I want to take and cut most of this material out so I'm not fitting this huge piece here. So what I did is I have a compass set here, and it's set to about 7/8 of an inch, so it's more than enough. And then I have another compass. This is set to the width of the molding. I'm not going to use that until I get this totally fit. So what I'll do is I'll just take this, get this piece so it's more manageable. So now it's easier to fit this, and I have my tick mark, and it's lined up with that center line. And again, these are longer than they need to be. A lot of times you need to take and get some of that fuzz off of there so you can see what you're working with. So now, here we go. So now, and I might even take a little bit more off of here so none of this is getting in my way. So there's the tick mark right there. I'm probably about 1/2 inch over on each side. So I'll take and cut this off, and now it's just a matter of going over to the spindle. Actually, that looks pretty good now that I cut that side off. See how tight that looks? So there'll just be a little bit of fine tuning now. So I'll take and cut this, and then I'll get this fit perfect up against there, okay? Okay, I cut this end off, and then I put this up here, and I guess I'll show you how I get this dialed right in. So I put it up here. Now I can see a little bit of gap right along here and then right here. So that means I need to take out, I just take a pencil just kind of mark the area that needs to be taken down. Now it looks like there's just a little gap there, and it's all tight through here. So then here's the other area that I need to concentrate on. So it's just these two areas that I'm going to take just a little material away until it's a real snug fit. So that's the process I use. I just put it up there, I look for tiny gaps, and then take the area where it's tight. It's the same thing as fitting a plank on a boat. And it's you can see that these tick marks really work well here, so you know you're not over one way or the other. You're always putting it back in the same spot every time. So I'll take this over to the spindle sander and dial it right in, okay? Okay, a few trips to the spindle sander and I have this piece fitting just right. So now remember, these are long still. We'll cut those in a minute, but the next thing to do after you get this line good, or this arc, is to take and cut this to width. So you want to cut it the same width as the straight pieces here, which is about 5/8 of an inch. So I have this compass set for that. So now when you're using a compass like this, it's important to keep it the same for each piece that you mark. So what I do is I extend this pin down as far as it'll go. Sometimes I have to move the lead up, and I'll keep this pin parallel with that inside edge. And then I'll just go ahead and see, because it really does make a difference if you tilt it one way or the other. So I keep that parallel. And go ahead and mark that. Now this doesn't have to be totally perfect, because at the very end, once all this is glued up, there'll be a little bit of fine tuning to get all these outside edges to match. That's why I decided to go with 5/8 instead of a half, because I might take a little bit off as I blend all that in together. But that'll be close enough. So I'll go ahead and cut that on the bandsaw and then sand it. Now one thing I wanted to mention also that was really important is when I'm making all these cuts and sanding, like when I sanded the perimeter of this piece, you got to make sure that all your equipment is totally 90. Like the sander here, you got to make sure that this table is 90 to this. And I went ahead and put a square up there. I check it every once in a while, and I know that this table on this side, since this tilts this way, this side is always perfectly 90. So if you can make sure all your sanders are set up to 90, then you're not going to have a problem when you start putting these together. You won't have a gap, this way or this way. So it's important to make sure all your tables are set correct. So I'll go ahead and cut this and sand it, and then I'll show you how I cut it to length, okay? Okay, so I just wanted to show you how I sanded that on disc sander. So now you want to sand these end pieces so they're roughly the same width, pretty close to the same width as the sides. That way you don't have to do more work after they're on there. Everything will be real close. So this piece is almost done. You can see it's still long on the end, but I'm going to show you how to cut this to length now. So I always work with two pieces. I fit this one, then I'll cut and fit this one, and then I'll go ahead and glue this one on. And then I'll fit this next piece, and then I'll glue this one on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up here. Now these ends are done. They're sanded and they're square. So I want to I have to cut this one to match this. There's my line there. So what I'm going to do is, I've got this little 6-inch rule here, and I've got some double-side tape on it. I'm going to take that tape off. And then I'm going to put this piece up, the corner piece, Put it right where it wants to go. And then I'm going to put the 6-inch rule right on that end. So it's nice and flush against that. It's wanting to stick on me already. Right there. I'll get her. See how nice and flush that is? Right there, and then I can remove this piece. I can put this piece up. Now I use these little mechanical pencils. I think it's 0.7 millimeter, the lead. These are a little bit finer than a regular pencil. They're good for this, because you don't want that line to be real fat. So I'll line this up right with my tick mark, and then I'll go ahead and make the mark. That's all there is to it. And then I'll take this over to the bandsaw, I'll cut it, and I'll sand it on the disc sander, and I'll make sure that these work together, and then I'll cut this to length. Okay? Okay, I went ahead and cut this piece and took it to the disc sander and sanded it to the line. And when I first put it up against here, I had a little bit of gap on the outside edge, so I had to just take it over the sander and take a little bit more material off the inside edge. And it's sitting flush now. Now, I did make a mark on this side, but I haven't cut it yet because I want to get this one glued on. And then I'll go ahead and make sure this one still fits, and if it does, then I'll cut that. So, and the way I got this mark was, since this is an arc, I used a bevel gauge and set the bevel gauge to this side, and then what I did was I put it up, I lined up my tick mark. I have a tick mark right here, and then I transferred that angle. So it is a slight angle there. And then once I do cut this, that'll be the end for this piece, and then when I start to cut and fit this piece, if any adjustments need to be made, it'll be made in the corner piece. So it's time to go ahead and glue up this piece. So the whole reason that I don't glue all this up at once is, well, first of all, I used to cut all these pieces and leave them all loose, and then I'd glue them all together at once. But there's too much that can happen, and too much that kind of moves and changes over time. So what I do is I cut and fit 2 pieces at a time, and then I'll go back and glue this one. Once that piece is on there and it's set for good, then you're only fitting to one piece, one side right here. And then you'll go ahead and glue this one on, but not before you fit this piece. So the whole reason I didn't glue this one on first is because when I fit this piece, I need to cut it a little bit long. So that's why I always do one in advance. So it's time to go ahead and glue it now. It fits right in there. And I'm going to use Gorilla Glue. That's why I have these gloves on. This polyurethane glue, it'll turn your hands all black if you let it. So I'm going to spread that on, and I'm also going to put some on the wood. And this is going to foam out, but that'll be fine. I'm putting some on here because that end grain really sucks it in. And the nice thing about this, having this finish on there, it's going to help protect it a little bit so the glue doesn't soak into this top section here, or the veneer. But the Gorilla Glue sands really nice. And it blends in, but it will foam up. I'm using 1 1/4 inch brads. And again, this is a little bit thicker than this, so I'm going to put it on there and just kind of center it and then shoot the brads. And I even made some center marks on here because, and I do that because I'm trying to hit this center ply here. Whether I do or not, I don't know, but I'm going to at least try to, because if you get that brad in there in between plies, it'll want to move this piece up or down just a little bit. So I'm going to try to keep the brad gun level, and I'm going to try to shoot it in that center ply. So I'll put this on and I'll try to center it. That looks pretty good. Got my lacquer here. Yep, that's it. So I'm just going to shoot 2 brads in this. And then I'll take a look. Make sure it didn't move on me. I'll just kind of wipe a little bit. That looks good. So when this will foam up a little bit, I want to keep this edge clear, obviously, because I'm going to be fitting to it. And I can feel the bottom. It's proud that way, and it's proud a little bit on the top here. Okay, so that'll do it. So the next step is to make sure this still looks good. And I'm going to try not to bump this or jar it too much while it's setting up. And that fit still looks really nice. So that means I can go ahead and looks like I'm a little off on this. I'm going to bring this in just a touch more with my bevel gauge. So I'm going to cut and sand to that line. And then I'm going to leave this piece loose, and then I'm going to start fitting this corner piece. Okay? Okay, I cut this end piece to length. I took it to the bandsaw, cut it, and then I took it over the disc sander and ground this square. So this piece is all set. And you can see that corner I bradded on foaming up. And every once in a while I take some lacquer on a rag and clean the edges out. I don't want to build up there. And now it's time to cut and fit this corner piece. So I laid the panel right on the stock here, and I also put one of the edge bands under the panel back here to keep this thing level. It just makes it easier. And now it's pretty much the same procedure as I did for this end piece. I lay it on here, and I take a pencil and make my mark. And you just want to make sure you position the stock far enough under, because you want to go past the tick mark a little bit. You want to keep those long until the very end and then cut them. And you also want to have enough stock over here, so you can see that I have enough there. So I'll take and cut this out on a bandsaw, take it over to the spindle sander and sand that until it fits. And I'll start the camera up when I start fitting this piece to the edge, okay? Okay, I cut out this piece on the bandsaw, took it over to the spindle sander, and it's getting real close. And I had part of that line still on the inside edge, but there comes a point where you need to get rid of that line because it kind of messes with your eye. you see that dark line from the pencil, and you can't tell what's what. So I take and clean that line off with a sanding block. So I've got it up here, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but there's just a little bit of gap in here. So I'll take and sand this section here, and then from here to here. So it's the same process as that end piece. I'll take this over and do a little fine tuning on it and get this piece to fit real tight up against there, okay? Okay, a couple trips to the spindle sander, and I have this piece fitting real nice now. So that's fitting, and the ends are still long, but I want to go ahead and I laid out the outside line with my compass. So the next step is to cut and sand this to width. Okay? Okay, I cut and sanded this piece to width, and now it's time to cut it where it meets this end piece. So it's the same thing I did on the last one. I took this this arced end piece, put it up here, and then laid my 6-inch rule there, taped it just so it's nice and flush on the end there. And now I'll take and place this where it wants to go. And make a mark, cut and sand that. And I'm going to leave this one long until this is glued on. Okay? Okay, I went ahead and cut this on a bandsaw, and then I took it to the disc sander and ground it square. So I'll set this end piece up here, and I'll butt it against that first corner piece. The joint is still good there. And then I'll put this piece on. It fits real nice up against the corner of the plywood and against this end piece. The joint looks real good. So I'm going to leave this one long still, and the next step is to go ahead and glue and brad this one on. So I'll apply glue to the inside edge, the outside edge of the plywood, and then to the end grain, to the butt end. I'll put the glue on and then brad this one into place. Okay? Okay, I went ahead and glued on this end piece, and then I put the corner piece back up here, and I had just a slight gap at the outside edge here. So I took it over to the disc sander and just barely touched this inner edge and got it to come right in, so it fits real nice now. And then what I did is I have my tick mark over here, and I transferred that, and then I just took a little square and made it square right there. So the next step is to cut and sand this square. And then I'll set this aside, and then I'll cut and fit this this long end piece. Alright? Okay, I went ahead and glued this corner piece on and installed the brads in it. And I turned the panel sideways on the bench and cut and fit this straight section here. And I just took it to the table saw, cut a square at the end, and it happens to meet just fine, so I'm not going to do anything with that. And then I transferred the tick mark from the corner to this piece and cut it on the table saw. So this piece is all set. So now it's time to cut and fit this corner piece just like that last one. And then I can go ahead and glue this. So I think you get the procedure by now. You leave the one loose, fit the next piece, and then once that's fit, go ahead and glue this one on. So I'm going to work my way around this panel, and really it doesn't take that much time to do it. And I'm not going to worry about any of this ooze here. The only thing I'm going to watch is right here, but I'm cutting and fitting quick enough to where I don't think that's going to be a problem. So I'll work my way around, and I'll start the camera back up when I have this last piece to fit in between the two corner pieces. That'll be the last one. Okay? Okay, I worked my way around the panel, and I'm down to the last two pieces. And I didn't glue this corner piece on until I had this straight section fit also. So you can see there they're fit, and it's ready to be glued. So that won't take long to just glue up those two. It took about an hour and a half to go around from this point all the way around it to get these two. So It's not too bad, probably 2.5 to 3 hours to do this total. That's if all your machinery is set up and ready to go, which I don't think is bad considering what this gives you. It's going to be a nice stable panel with, I think, a real nice border, solid mahogany border. So I'll glue these last two up and I'll start the camera one more time, okay? Okay, I have the last piece here. I have the glue on it and it's ready to be brad nailed into place. Just kind of make sure that that's the same, on the same surface as the one next to it. So that'll do it. I'll let that set up. It's the end of the day, so I'll come in tomorrow and I'll take this finish off of it and then I'll run it through my thickness sander. Then we'll see what it looks like. Okay? Okay, it's the next day and all the glue has set up. You can see where that Gorilla Glue foamed out on the edges and where all the pieces meet. So now it's time to run it through the thickness sander. I have my Woodmaster set up with 80 grit on it. And if you don't have a thickness sander like that, you can just work this in with a DA or a palm sander or by hand. And but before I put it through the sander, you can see the glue. See how the glue is raised up? And I want to take and just knock that down a little bit so at least I have somewhat of a flat surface to run on a table of the sander. So I just do that by hand. I've got a block here with 60 grit and 80 grit on it. And it's not going to take long. Just a couple of minutes just to knock that glue down, just so I have a good surface here. And then I'm also going to strip this finish off, which I do with a heat gun and a scraper. This finish isn't very thick on here. I'll just do a little section. I'm going to clamp this in place, but so it's only going to take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to just run through and take the majority of that finish off. You don't have to get every little last bit of color out of it. So I'll do that, and the reason I do that is it saves on the sandpaper. If you could take the majority of that finish off, it won't gum up the sandpaper or heat it up. So it's just easier on that. So I'll strip this and I'll flatten these the band out a little bit, or flatten that glue down, and then I'll run it through the sander and I'll start the camera and see what it looks like after a few passes, okay? Okay, here's one last shot of it before I run it through the sander. It took me a little longer than I thought because I wanted to clean all that glue out that had formed right in this corner here. Some of it was pretty wide, and just taking a sander and hitting the mahogany band didn't do it. So I had to take this and scrape that glue off of the surface of the plywood. And that's going to be a lot better on the sander. And one other thing I wanted to mention, it's a correction. Earlier in the video I said that I usually cut these bands about a 32nd thicker than the plywood. It's actually closer to a 1/16 thicker. That way when I center it on there from the bottom and the top, it's proud about a 32nd. So I just wanted to clear that up. So I took all the finish off, or most of it, 95% or so. There's still a couple little spots, but that's not a big deal. And then the only other thing, I'm not doing anything with these edges until I get the two surfaces sanded down. And then I'll take some Fama wood and hit the brad heads. And on the corners, I'll probably take a countersink and sink those brads a little bit deeper, because all the corners are just a touch thicker than this, and I'm going to work those down, so I don't want to run into that brad. But it looks like they're deep enough on the straight pieces. Okay, so I'm gonna run it through the sander, and then we'll take a look after I sand it. Okay. Okay, I have the one side sanded. Now I ran it through my Woodmaster a few passes, and I didn't feel comfortable using that. The banding is raised a little bit, about a 32nd above the surface, and the leading edge, it was kind of folding this corner over a little bit. The rollers were probably doing that, and I just didn't feel safe. One of the corners, it started to take it down a little bit too much. It never touched the surface, but it took this corner, or one of the corners, down a little bit more than the other. So I just stopped. I only ran it through a few passes, and I figured I would use my DA. So I have my 5-inch electric DA, and I have a vacuum hooked up to it. Really helps with the dust. And I put 50 grit on there, and this is after about 5 minutes, this is what it looks like. And you can just see how beautiful that grain is on that old plywood. It's all flush, and all the color is real nice and even. So I'm going to take that 50 grit off of there, hit it with 80 with the DA, and then I'll inline it with 80 or 100. I'll inline it this way, and on this little band over here, I'll just kind of inline it, and that'll be ready for stain. So for those of you who don't have a thickness sander, don't worry, that it only took about 5 minutes with that electric DA to get it looking like this. So I'm really happy with it. It looks great. Now the banding is a little bit lighter in color. Whenever you strip old mahogany on wood boats, it always tends to have this darker tone, and I think that's light does that over years. It penetrates a little bit into the surface, but that's fine as long as the color is real nice and even. It doesn't matter that this is a little bit darker than this newer Philippine mahogany. When I go to put the stain out, that'll even out, and there won't be such a contrast. And even if there is a little bit of contrast afterwards, it's not a big deal because this is a separate piece. It's a band, so it doesn't matter. Not to me anyway. I think it'll still look really nice. So I'll go ahead and I'll put 80 grit on the DA, sand this, and then I'll flip it over and do this other side. I still haven't done that. I'll hit the other side, and then I'll inline it with 80 or 100, and then I'll work this outer edge. I'll Famo those the heads of the brads there, and I'll put a radius on the top side, probably like an 1/8 inch on the top and a 1/16 on the bottom. Just slightly radius that, finish sand this, and then it'll be ready for stain. So the next time you see it, it'll have stain on it and a few coats of satin varnish. It'll all be done. Okay? Okay, 3 quick things I wanted to mention that I forgot to in that last clip. And that is, when I sanded this surface, I had the 80 grit on the DA, and the first thing I did was try to work down that band first, because it's a little bit proud. So if you take it like this and work it, you're going to sand too much of this and you're going to cause a dish in there. So I concentrated right on top of that, kept this surface parallel to the or kept the sander parallel to the surface of the plywood, and I just worked this edge down first. That way I wasn't working unnecessary material down here. Then once I got this flush, then I concentrated the sander right here, and I just went back and forth methodically to make it even. So I concentrated on this first to bring that down flush, and then I kept the sander back a little bit and just went back and forth, and that's how I got that, and it didn't take long. And one thing I wanted to mention, this veneer is about a 1/16 of an inch thick, and if I had to guess, I probably took off less than a 64th to sand this down. It didn't take any time. I just sanded it until that finish went away and the color started looking even, and there's no more stain in the pores. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was, and I didn't yesterday when I was gluing on the border, the corner pieces, you want to orient that grain so it's pretty much on a 45 to the panel. So the grain is going this way. I just wanted to mention that. Alright? So the next time you see it, it'll have a finish on it. Okay? Okay, I wanted to take one last shot of this panel before I stain it. So I hit it with that DA with 50 grit and then 80 grit, and then I inlined it by hand with 80 grit. And then I put an 1/8 inch radius on the top edge and a 1/16 inch radius on the bottom edge. But you could see the moldings, you could see how nice and tight they are. And then the color of this old plywood and the grain pattern, it's really nice. So that'll do it. The next time I turn the camera on, this will be stained and it'll have a finish on it, a satin finish. Okay? Okay, here's the wood panel all done. I'm real happy with how it came out. So I stained it, applied 2 coats of sealer and 2 coats of finish, which was a satin varnish, and I sanded with 400 grit. So you can see it has that nice sheen on it, that nice like rubbed effect sheen. And see how nice the mahogany band matches that old plywood. You could hardly even see the line there. Remember how that was this was a little bit darker when I sanded it than that newer mahogany band that I put on there. But when you sand it properly and apply that stain, the stain evens it all out. Like look along here, looks all like one piece. But you can see the corners here. So it's a good way of taking an old piece of plywood like that and giving it a new life. And it's not hard to cut and glue these bands around that plywood to hide that end grain. The end grain of the plywood. And this gives you a really nice panel that's dimensionally stable. So this is going to be the bottom shelf in a table that's just about done now. I just have to do a little bit more polishing on some stainless parts. Here's some parts here. These are what hold the legs. And I'll show you the legs real quick. Here's a couple of them hanging here. I brushed the last coat on them last night. So I'm making another video where you can see this table completed. But in this video, I just wanted to show you how to band that plywood. You could do this with any shape. And the corners, I think, is what intimidates a lot of people, but it's really not hard to do if you just follow that procedure that I showed you. And then I have a nice gradual arc along here. I like that. So that'll do it. That'll do it for the video on how to band plywood with solid mahogany. Okay?